Was a quiet, bitterly cold night when Jamal, a humble mechanic barely making ends meet, was locking up his small garage on the edge of town. The silence was broken by a soft, desperate whisper, "Help." It was so faint he almost thought he imagined it. Grabbing his flashlight, he followed the sound around the back of the garage, his heart pounding. There, half hidden behind a stack of discarded tires, was a teenage girl. She was barefoot, her clothes torn, her face bruised, and her entire body trembling from the cold and fear. Jamal froze for a moment, stunned by the sight. But instinct took over. He scooped her up gently and brought her inside. The garage was more workshop than home, but he laid her on his cot and wrapped her in his only blanket, the one he used to keep warm during the freezing nights. She said nothing, only stared at him with wide, terrified eyes. Jamal didn't have much, not even enough to fix his broken heater or keep his fridge stocked. But he couldn't turn away from someone in need. He quickly called 911, trying to stay calm as he knelt beside her, offering water and the last piece of bread he had. In those quiet minutes before the ambulance arrived, something shifted inside him. This wasn't just a random accident. This girl had clearly been through something terrible. And as she gripped his hand tightly, silently pleading for safety, Jamal understood that he was meant to find her that night. What he didn't know was that this single act of compassion, offered without question, without judgment, would not only change the girl's future, but would also completely transform his own life in ways he could never imagine. Inside Jamal's cramped workshop, the soft hum of an old ceiling fan was the only sound as the girl sat silently on the edge of his cot. She looked about 15 or 16, her face pale under the flickering light, her eyes darting around like a cornered animal. She said nothing, offered no name, and had no ID or phone. Just fear. Deep, raw fear. Jamal didn't push her. He heated up the last bit of soup he had and handed her a slice of dry bread. She accepted it wordlessly, eating slowly, as if unsure whether it was safe to trust even the food. Jamal sat nearby, quietly watching. That's when he noticed the bruises peeking out from beneath her sleeves, dark, deliberate marks on her thin arms. Something inside him twisted. He had seen pain before, on the streets, in his own life, but this was different. She wasn't just scared. She was traumatized. And still, she said nothing. When the distant sound of sirens grew louder, she flinched and gripped his arm. Her voice was barely a whisper, but her words hit him like a punch to the chest. "Please, don't let them send me back." Jamal looked at her, truly looked. He didn't know where she'd come from or what she'd endured, but he saw a soul shattered by something far worse than what she could express. He knew what it was like to be unwanted, unheard, unseen. He was just a poor mechanic. He didn't have answers. But in that moment, with this stranger holding on to him like her life depended on it, he knew one thing for sure: he couldn't let her go back to whatever had broken her. The hospital was a world Jamal had never spent much time in, bright white walls, the sterile scent, nurses rushing past. Yet every day after work, he sat in the same chair by her bedside, bringing small things to make her smile: a comic book, a warm drink, a small radio playing soft music. She still didn't talk much, but she began to look at him with something new in her eyes: trust. Doctors asked him why he kept coming. Social workers eyed him cautiously. "You don't have to get involved," they said. "She's not your responsibility." But Jamal couldn't look away. When Child Services finally sat him down, they told him everything. How the girl, now identified as Ava, had run from a foster home known for repeated abuse complaints. She had been passed around the system for years. No stability. No love. Just survival. Jamal's chest tightened. He remembered the cold nights on the streets when he was a teen, sleeping in his uncle's abandoned car, forgotten by everyone. That pain never really left him. And now it stared back at him through Ava's hollow eyes. They said she needed a temporary guardian while a safe placement was found. Jamal hesitated. His bank account was nearly empty. His garage barely kept him afloat. He lived alone in a space that wasn't even meant for living. But none of that mattered when he looked at her. Something in his gut told him, you were meant to find her. So with no certainty of how he'd manage, but with every ounce of compassion he had, Jamal took a deep breath and said, she can stay with me. It wasn't a rescue. It was a beginning, for both of them. Life didn't change overnight, but it changed enough. In the mornings, Jamal would head to the garage with Ava beside him, her backpack slung over her shoulder. She swept the floor, fetched tools, and listened as he explained how engines worked. In the evenings, they sat at a wobbly kitchen table, her pencil scratching out math problems while he cooked simple meals. They didn't have a lot, no big house, no extra comforts, but they had something stronger, peace. The kind that came from knowing you were safe, even if the world outside still spun too fast. Jamal taught her how to change a tire, how to check the oil, how to keep calm when things broke down. In return, Ava gave him something he hadn't felt in years, hope. She'd leave little notes with doodles near his tools. She asked about his past. She laughed, and sometimes she cried. But she let him in. And to Jamal's surprise, he let her in, too. Her presence softened something in him that had been hard for years. Word spread quietly through town. A few regular customers started tipping more. One man paid double, saying, use the rest for her books. A retired teacher stopped by and offered tutoring, no charge. Groceries showed up on his doorstep more than once, left anonymously. It wasn't pity, it was people moved by love, by change. Ava, once broken and scared, now smiled more days than not. Jamal, once hardened and closed off, found joy in the sound of her laughter echoing through the garage. In a town that had mostly passed him by, Jamal's quiet act of kindness had sparked something greater. A ripple. And it was healing them both, one moment at a time. A year later, the small-town community center buzzed with applause and flashing cameras. Banners hung from the ceiling. Families gathered in folding chairs. On the stage, under the glow of soft lights, stood Ava, shoulders back, head high, wrapped in a simple second-hand dress that looked like it was made just for her. She was no longer the frightened girl who had whispered for help in the dark. She was strong now. Whole. And when her name was called to receive a scholarship for resilience and academic excellence, the room erupted in cheers. At the back of the hall, Jamal stood, hands tucked in his worn jeans, clapping with quiet, unshakable pride. He wasn't her biological father. He hadn't given her a family name or a grand home. But he'd given her something more powerful, belief. Love. A place to belong. When Ava stepped up to the microphone, her voice wavered for just a second. Then she looked out into the crowd, straight at Jamal, and smiled. A year ago, she began, I was lost. Forgotten. I didn't trust anyone. Then, a broken man with a broken garage gave me something I'd never had, hope. The room fell silent. A few people wiped their eyes. Jamal did, too. He had fixed engines his whole life, but this was the first time he realized he had helped rebuild a soul. As Ava left the stage and ran to hug him, he held her tight, not saying a word. He didn't have to. Because in that moment, he knew the truth, saving her hadn't just changed her future, it had healed something deep inside him, too. And for the first time in years, Jamal truly felt whole. In a world where too many walk past pain, Jamal, a man with nothing to give but his heart, chose to stop, to care, and to act. What began as a quiet act of compassion on a cold night turned into a life-altering bond between two broken souls, each unknowingly saving the other. Ava found safety, trust, and the love she'd been denied for so long. And Jamal, once invisible to the world, discovered purpose, connection, and healing through her resilience. Their story isn't about wealth or grand gestures. It's about choosing kindness when it's inconvenient. About opening your door, and your heart, even when you're barely holding yourself together. In helping Ava rise, Jamal lifted himself. And in loving her, he found that family isn't always blood, sometimes, it's simply someone who refuses to give up on you. This story reminds us that the smallest act of humanity can spark the biggest transformation. That hope often appears not in heroic moments, but in quiet ones, in an open hand, a warm meal, or a single whispered, "You can stay." And sometimes, it's in those moments we realize, saving someone else is the very thing that saves us.